Hi, Jennifer. I see you online. Can you confirm that you can hear us from in the room?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Well, I'm just gonna have to agree to whatever, I guess, at this point. That's crazy.
What?
Because I'm not informed.
Yeah, you're on. You're on. We can hear you. Hey, everyone. So, welcome, everyone. Thanks for your patience when we finish the executive session. Welcome to the August 19th, 2025 regular BOT meeting. And I believe we got to take roll. Is that right, Missy? Okay.
All right. It's 7:08 p.m. Mayor Billy,
Here.
Trustee Larson,
Here.
Trustee Miller,
Here.
Trustee Maris. Here. And then I did see, Trustee Corvalon online, please.
I'm here, yes.
Thank you. I did see Mayor Pro Tem Sterling and Trustee.
They will not be here for this part. Neither.
Okay, so
They
Trustees
both.
Ty and
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Sterling will be absent for the regular meeting.
They correct.
Thank you.
They won't be here the rest of the night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. With that, we'll go right into our consent agenda. We have scroll back up here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 items on consent. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Two items on consent. The warrants and the minutes. Any questions? Looking for questions, discussion, and/or a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
We got a motion and a second.
People who were about the
Tanya, we're getting a little bit of feedback from you. Trustee Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Miller, and
Yes.
Trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. With that, we have staff reports. John?
Mayor
Yep.
Trustee, you have my staff report and the staff reports from staff. One thing we'd like to do tonight is give Rita an opportunity to give a verbal report on the state of the budget right now. So she's going to present a little bit on the financials for the last few months, a little update on our audit, and just a little look forward into our 2026 budget process.
Correct. Good evening, Mayor, trustees, members of the public.
For those who don't know me, my name is Rita Six. I'm the town treasurer. I'll be presenting a brief mid-year financial update, talk a little bit about the 2024 audit, and touch base on the upcoming 26 budget season, as John had mentioned. Year-to-date sales tax collected is 1% lower when compared to last year at the same time. We did receive a sales tax payment in August that is not included in the staff report in your packet. That payment in August is, of course, for sales tax revenue for June. And that is very similar to what we received last year. So we still have 3 months ahead of us, though, and those are some of the bigger sales tax months. I did go back and look at the 23 and 24 sales tax revenue just to see where those were at. And both of those years brought in just about the same amount, $2.3 million. So as far as the 25 budget goes, we budgeted just a little bit over $2.3 million. So hoping to get there. But like I said, currently, as of July, we are 1% lower than we were last year. So unless something changes, staff is recommending to continue budgeting at the same level moving forward once we get into the 2026 budget season. Year-to-date property tax is very similar to what was collected as of July last year. And as per the July staff report, we are trending higher than what is budgeted in 2025 by 12,000. And I always, of course, like seeing that. We should be receiving the preliminary tax assessments for 2026 by the end of this month. So just in time for the 2026 budget season. Each fund is showing better than projected numbers as of July 2025 financials. Any questions so far as the financials are concerned? If not, I'm going to just briefly talk about the 2024 audit. I thought it was important just to talk about this. Town had budgeted in the general fund $190,000 deficit. And we ended up with a deficit of $300,000. So that's a difference of $111,000. I just thought that's important to mention once we move forward into the 26 budget season. The main reason for this deficit was the decrease, as we know, of revenue in law enforcement back in 2024 in the amount of $170,000. And also we had budgeted $57,000 in paid parking fees. That did not happen. However, the overall budgeted loss for all funds, this is excluding the NDDA in 2024, was budgeted at $331,000. Again, this is for all funds. And actual loss for all funds was $312,000. Better than projected, changes in net assets in various other funds helped out the $111,000 deficit that we had in the general fund. So that's good news. Any questions on the 24 audit numbers? So really, now to the 26 budget. Staff has been working on the 26 budget for a couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to a smooth budget season this year. And we are hoping to have our first meeting on September 16th with some initial budget assumptions. That's all I got. Any questions?
Thanks, Rita. Questions for Rita?
That first meeting, is that going to be at our 1 hour standard meetings or a work session or?
I think
That's
it's
a
our standard meeting.
That's
Yeah.
a BOT meeting.
Okay.
We are well ahead of where we were last year, so I don't know that we're going to have such compression. I'd love to be able to have a work session so we can kind of walk through that budget in detail. And I think what we're thinking is being able to walk through the capital projects with the department heads here would be a good idea. That would maybe be an October thing. And so I would like to talk to you all about your ability to do that. And I think we could schedule as we have these last couple, like maybe at 6 o'clock or something like that, and then regular meeting at 7.
Right, thanks.
More questions for Rita? Any questions from the board for any of the town staff. Most of the folks who turn their reports are present. At least many of them.
I mean, I have a question for Rita as far as the budget deficit goes.
Yes, go ahead.
It sounds like we're like 150,000 more in deficit than we thought we were.
So that was in the general fund. You're correct. In 2024, we ended up with a deficit that was 111,000 greater than we had anticipated. And again, mostly due really to the
Parking, yeah.
Well, no, parking was just a small amount. It was the PD revenue. If you remember, that we were given budget numbers that were way too high. And that was revenue that had come in $170,000 less than we had budgeted.
Got you.
From the
So,
sheriff's department,
Right.
traffic.
I know we're not having a budget conversation right now, but are we gonna be having, well, I'm worried about it. So are we gonna have a conversation about this in more detail? I know John just said that we're gonna have a work session, but I'm a little worried about it. And I would like to find out where we can make some cuts, unfortunately, to make this reality
Right.
happen next year.
Trustee Corvalon, what typically happens, Rita and I have had our first two budget meetings between us that are between us that we kind of have. She's collected the staff budgets from all the departments at this point of kind of what our staff feel like their expenses next year and revenues might look like. We have been doing a pretty good job of controlling expenses this year, but that is part of that ongoing conversation. And so in that first meeting that Rita talked about, where we talk about kind of our initial projections, that's where we'll make sure that you guys have a good understanding of where we are and maybe some of our initial thoughts about that piece of this conversation. But it's certainly an important thing to move as we move forward. Is just
Yeah, and
managing
as a personal preference, I prefer this in like a work session so we can really just like focus. This for the future, like all budget stuff would be great to just have an.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I
it's-
do want to expand on that a little bit. Just, the 2025 budget in the general fund, we budgeted a deficit of 263,000, right? And so currently, when you look at your July financials, we are obviously doing better than that as of July. And that is mainly due to less expenditures than we have projected, but it's only middle of the year. So, but really, unless we come up with additional revenue sources in the general fund, I mean, I don't know how that can really improve as far as the bottom line for the general fund.
Okay.
Because
Well, I
really,
mean,
sales tax,
let's
I don't
talk
think,
about it. Basically, I'm like, let's just talk about this later, like
right,
really.
exactly.
We'll come forward with a document that you can use. And if the board would like to have another work session to talk about this issue, I think that could be a thing for a future discussion.
That sounds good. I do like the idea of work sessions being before a regular session personally, primarily, but we can do other nights if needed, but not crazy about the fourth quarter meeting fest. So
We're trying to be done by Thanksgiving, just so y'all know, that's the goal. So Rita and I have been keeping on track. One thing I'd like to I've told you before, but Rita got our audit done in May, which is unheard of in local government, and it's super cool. So that really set us up well to not have to have those crazy year-end meetings.
thanks, Rita. Any questions for the other folks on staff or for John? Okay, with that, we'll go to trustees. I'll start it off with a verbal report. I didn't really participate this past month. I was gone for part of it on family vacation and work, but didn't do much with regards to liaison. But I did last week. I had signed up Old Town for as a resident for a community wildfire mitigation plan. And so it was a walkthrough last week with two representatives of wildfire partners, and Andrew Jocelyn, who's our fire marshal, who also lives in Old Town, and Aaron Ty, who as a trustee and also lives in Old Town. So we were all, and myself, and we're all basically residents, the three of us. And so that's the first step. We do a walkthrough. We'll get a report with some basic high level plans and ideas of just generally what needs to happen there. And then really the next step, I'm going to try to talk John into we need 5 sponsors. And fortunately the town owns a lot of land in Old Town, or at least enough that the town could also be a sponsor. So if that's the case, then we need one more. We think we'll have an easy time getting one or more sponsors. And then we continue with this and go into Firewise, try to get a Firewise designation, because right now I can't get a a wildfire partners certification in high density with a 10th acre lot. I'm not eligible because we all live so close together. It's kind of, unless the community's doing it together, they don't value it. For just a few little people to do it, it really has to be a greater effort. So the Firewise certification that we can go through as a community will allow people to get those. And for Old Town, which is really one of the more vulnerable neighborhoods due to the construction type and the density and the fact that we got just long fuses of coniferous forests coming at us from the west, we're pretty vulnerable. So we're glad to be getting that moving forward. And there were some great ideas. I can talk with you, John, later too, about things the town could do. And Wildfire Partners told us some grant money available through the state that with a pretty minimal match for money that could go possibly straight to the streets department to help with, and parks department with some efforts. So it was a very worthwhile meeting. We'll talk more about it in BOT meetings in the future. Other folks got verbal reports?
Jump in. I just also want to, definitely props to the wildfire mitigation guys. We did the report several years ago and have slowly been working on it. Could not tackle it all at once and are working on the various steps that they suggested and doing the big one this summer ourselves at our house. But like you, we can't get the Firewise, but working through all the little steps to try and do as much as we can. So definitely encourage everyone to work with them because they can help with things, and certainly with some of the smaller projects, they can actually help offset the cost.
Yeah, if up to $500 every year. So you could just keep doing little projects every year. And that's pretty much everyone in the county. So I think it's homeowners only, which is unfortunate for renters, but that up to $500, a combination of materials and labor. But they need before and after photos. But you go to Wildfire Partners website and there's information there.
Jump in with the report. DDA meeting was last week on Wednesday. Unfortunately, due to flight delays, I was not able to make it as I was flying back from Salt Lake City. So apologies for not being a part of that. But I was able to make the CC4CA meeting on behalf of the town Friday morning. It was a good meeting with the group, starting to look ahead towards the 2026 plans, legislative and advocacy. We went through a lot of advocacy options and sort of compiling a list. And as there are advocacy options that members of either the Board of Trustees or the community can participate in, I'll share those. Right now, it's a lot of things with very detailed legislative testimony pieces that are primarily targeted towards East County groups and communities. So it didn't really have a lot to do with us at this point, but as those come about, I will pass those along.
Thanks, Chris.
So we had our NEPADAC meeting last week. We had a few people out of town, so it was a pretty small group. We didn't have quorum, so no decisions were made. But the main takeaway is that we're still working on trying to identify projects and where to put the money that we have saved up in the fund. So 2 people from Boulder County from their Department of Transportation are going to be more focused on identifying projects to work on and figure out where to put that money towards and what to prioritize. So more to come in the future.
Thanks, Tierney. Luke, anything to report?
No, nothing in particular this time.
Thanks. Tanya, anything to report with the BZA?
No, we have not met.
Thanks, Tanya. With that, we'll go to our first action item and one and only at the moment action items of the evening. That ordinance 878 clarifying deed deed restriction timelines. John?
That's me.
Or-
Britt, sorry.
It's okay. I did want to make a note, the attachment I made for the ordinance, I uploaded the wrong one. So you'll see at the top, there's an X. And so that will be corrected and updated for public information before the end of the meeting. Just haven't had a chance to get to it. But it's literally just changing to an 8 instead of an X. Otherwise, there's no content difference. But beyond that, this is Ordinance 878, and it's amending Ordinance 856, which is regarding the deed restriction language. Just as a reminder, December 5th in 2023, you guys passed the Ordinance 856, which states deed restrictions shall remain in effect for a minimum of 20 years. At the July 4th meeting, Mayor Billy and Trustee Corvalone brought forth an aim requesting to increase that timeline. And during this meeting, the Board of Trustees directed town staff to research deed restriction terms in other communities. So at the January 7th meeting, staff presented the information to the board looking for next steps on deed restriction timeline, and I was looking for updates on housing language. The board felt it was appropriate to get feedback and recommendations from the Planning Commission to weigh on any of those Chapter 16 items. We haven't gotten to a conclusion there. Seems there needs to be more discussion, but I really wanted to move forward this deed restriction language for Trustee Corvalone and Mayor Billy. And as we're having these conversations more, thought it was good to get that language in there. So at the March 26th meeting for the PC, the language that states to have all deed restrictions and covenants to either be set by the town administrator, designee, or board of trustees with at least 20-year minimum. And at the May 21st meeting, after some discussion back and forth, the PC directed staff to bring that draft forward. So it took a little bit longer for us to get that draft forward to meet the minimum posting requirements and things like that, but we're finally back before you. As you will see in, another thing I did want to update on here is during the review of Ordinance 856 for the purpose of amending the deed restriction requirement, town staff identified the need for additional revisions to improve clarity and consistency. Specifically, staff recommends amending Ordinance 856 to include the definition of the term housing development in section 16-322 and revise the eligibility criteria in section 16-323. The proposed amendments to section 16-323 clarify that in order to qualify for affordable housing development variance, all dwelling units within the proposed development must be designated as affordable housing and subject to required deed restriction. It was originally stated like 10% or something along that lines, but now we're requiring all. So we just made that clarification, and Attorney Madsen put in the definition for housing development. And so we have some proposed motions for you below and the ordinance attached, but let us know if you have any questions. So really the change was just adding at least 20, or wait, no, we bumped it up to 30 years. I'm sorry, I apologize. At least 30 years. So that being the absolute minimum, and then kind of deciding from there based on the project and what they're asking for. So based on the research we did, we felt it was more appropriate to at least add that kind of minimum. Let me know if you want more clarification. Sorry, that was a lot. And this has been going on since obviously forever, and I apologize for that. But since we couldn't reach that other conclusion, we're still working on that. We just brought this forward.
And so when I read it, go ahead, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I think that at least 30 years is fine. I'm fine with that. I think that's a great compromise, and I'm willing to move forward with it myself. How do you feel, Billy?
I feel like I'm up for clarifying questions at this point first, but I could, one of which I have, but I'll ask that. I'm not quite that solid, but, do other folks have clarifying questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. So just to clarify about the housing development definition and it now, so was it at least 10% of the development had to be offer affordable rents, but now we're saying everything does? Did we talk about that last time?
I don't recall that, but that is what I just heard. Britt saying it sounds like it came from the PC.
So the original language said a housing development is considered affordable if at least 10%, but I think it was just was it a typo? I can't remember, Jennifer.
It was an inconsistency, so, it was, I'm trying to piece this together. This is a couple months ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry to put you on the
No, it's
spot. I
okay.
should have thought of that
Um,
question before this.
see. It was just that, oh, I know what it is. So if you look at 16.325A, it said a developer may request a variance for a housing development in which all units are deed restricted affordable housing. So it said that there, and then above in 323, it said that only 10% of the units needed to be deed restricted. So there was a conflict between 323, the eligibility section, where it said 10%, and then 325, where it said all units needed to be deed restricted in order to get the variance.
But that's only for
So the
a variance.
Yeah,
Are there
so
other
that's a
things that you might
variance
be
to
eligible
get
for?
Up to 50% of the setbacks besides height. So instead of, for instance, if it was a 30-yard setback from the street frontage, they would be allowed to ask for 15.
Mm-hmm.
And so originally, when this was brought before you guys, it was discussed that they would need to be completely affordable in order to ask for that type of variance.
And is the variance the only thing that kind of a housing development gets from us? Or are there, I guess I'm just asking, I want to clarify if, can it be a housing development and get certain things? And then if it's 100% deed restricted, they also get a variance?
So if there is, how we kind of at least set it up from like the things that we can offer at the
Mhm.
town right now is if there's an affordable piece to it in general,
Mhm.
the application fee is waived.
Okay.
And then we have to have the meeting within 30 days of them submitting that application.
Okay.
And that has to be for the planning commission and the board of trustees. And I believe the language states that if it's not on a regular scheduled meeting, we have to hold a special meeting.
Okay. But that's not called a housing development anymore, according to this. It would be called something else.
It is now called a housing development. We called it a development project originally.
It's possible that we could have money that we could put into a project at some
Mm-hmm.
point through housing grants or something like that. And likely we would have another agreement on top of that that would dictate the return on investment to the town in terms of affordability
Mm-hmm.
for something like that. So I think this is really purely about the variance. And then
Mhm.
we could have other structures that would sit on top of that for other incentives that we may be able to provide.
Okay. So this is purely about the variance.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
variance and then that addition of the deed restriction language.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No,
That
thank
was a
you.
little
Thank you.
confusing.
Or clarifying questions? Okay, well, that will go to public comment. Does anyone have a comment on our amendment to the ordinance regarding deed restrictions for affordable housing? Our amendment will extend that period from 20 years to at least 30, from at least 20 years to at least 30 years. No one in the room?
Really, are there other changes besides that? Well, I mean, there was the whole bit about 10% to 100%. Is that also?
That was it sounds like that was just a correction of an inconsistency. It should have been 100%.
Always been 100%.
Yeah, that was just something we all overlooked a couple years ago.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Any other public comments, folks online? Okay. All right, well, that will bring it back to the board for discussion and a motion. I do have a little discussion, but I'll let other folks go first. Okay. All right, so my discussion. I So looking through this, that I'm just trying, okay, yeah, there it is. So in 324, it'd be page 67 of the packet. All deed restrictions required under this section shall remain in effect for a minimum period of 30 years. The town manager shall have authority at their discretion in consultation with town legal and planning staff to establish a longer period of restriction based on factors including but not limited to the scale of the development, the amount of public subsidy or incentive involved, the level of affordability, in consistency with the town's long-term housing goals. The length of the deed restriction must be determined by the town manager prior to the scheduling of the PC hearing under 16-325A-D. The term of the restriction shall be clearly stated in the deed restriction document and recorded accordingly. So I do like that at least it makes it clear that the town manager could extend that period if it made sense, as for assorted reasons they list there. Initially, I was really, well, I am probably in theory in favor of in perpetuity being what these are for, but I understand there's just the realities of what will entice people to build and what won't. I know we talked about at least 30 years. I thought we were talking 40. We had another trustee who was saying in perpetuity before. So I don't know, John, what are the pros and cons of like in perpetuity versus years?
I think a housing intervention strategy for the town is going to require multiple pieces. And I think we all want to make sure there's permanently affordable housing in Nederland. I think what I like to say is like we wouldn't build town hall and then sell it in 30 years. And I think if we're investing in housing, it's kind of the same thing. And I think there's maybe even multiple use cases here. If we do build on town-owned property, I think there needs to be an agreement that says that's in perpetuity because it's town asset. I think if we're investing money into a project, that changes the equation too, if we're able to apply for a grant or provide other funding for it. On the variance, I think typically the way I think of variances is that they're an extraordinary remedy and they're putting something into our town that's that there had to be a change for it to allow that to happen. And so I think it's reasonable to expect that there is an affordability covenant on something like that. But with the amount of incentives that we have, if that was the only thing they were doing is providing affordable housing for that time, and we're not actually investing in that property, we're just changing the variant or, putting a variance in place for that to happen in terms of density. I don't know I guess the question for you would be, what is reasonable to expect for that in return for that investment and having those deed restrictions? The other thing to think about with deed restrictions is that does create some capacity issues that we have to make sure that we're managing so that we make sure that they're meeting what they're required to do. And that's just something that we just need to manage. So that may be,
What's that specifically? You just got to keep track of the years, you mean, or the?
yeah, and we'd need to have an agreement written out that says how staff would be able to verify, similar to like a short-term rental occupancy. It would need to be something like that so that we can verify that the deed restrictions are in place at the proper AMI. So I think it's definitely a fine line to walk. And this is also, I guess the other thing I'd note is that you could always change this ordinance if we find that we have more resources to put towards it or if we build a different program. But 30 years gives you, it's better than 20, I guess I would say right now. And I think we just don't have tons to offer in that space for a private developer.
Okay.
You could think about things if you wanted to. There are other communities that do incentives like tap fees or other things like that if it is purely affordable housing. And we could look at building some other programs around what we do in those spaces. But I just wanted to mention this is like a thing where a lot of times they talk about the capital stack in affordable housing projects. And for us, there may be multiple incentives that we offer. Like, here's your density bonus from variance. And then if you're willing to do more, then you can also get these other things that we could add on kind of to sweeten the pot if it's a really good deal.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. Other comments? Tanya, any other comments?
Yeah, thank you. Can we say that if this development occurs on what was previously town-owned land, that it's more than 30 years? It could be 100 years or in perpetuity?
Yes, I think that'd be a different kind of agreement because we wouldn't be giving them a variance to build the affordable housing. We'd be building an agreement for them to build on it would be like a leasehold or some other kind of agreement for them to build that structure. And
Okay.
into that, we would definitely, I would highly recommend that if we're building on town-owned land, you get the longest possible deed restriction.
Okay,
But
and
this
so
would be
this
more like a-
ordinance allows us that flexibility?
It probably wouldn't come into play because town-owned land is generally zoned public. And so I think it would be a
We
different,
have discussed developing town-owned land, so why would it not come into play? I don't understand.
this is intended for a private property. Our code, our yard and bulk tables and some of our other zoning requirements for residential zoned property has some limitations in terms of density, which is something that is important for the character of Nederland. And what this is saying is that we will give you a certain amount more density in some of these areas, like maybe slightly reduced setbacks or more.
I
building
understand.
height. And so that's where the difference is. This would be more like a private property project. But if there was a project that's more public, you would use something like our PUD process or something similar to say, this is what this development would look like. And then you could build those same restrictions in that way.
Oh, so each public lot that we would donate or sell would have its own set of restrictions, individually catered to its location? Is that what you're saying?
You could definitely do that. I think it would work similar, I mean, different thing, but it would work similar to the process with Teens Inc. for the childcare facility. And you'd
Please.
probably end up with a similar agreement, maybe not the same
Okay.
terms, but something like that.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So, any public lands not included in this ordinance particularly at all, because it would have its own set of requirements.
Would public land be stay affordable in perpetuity?
I think that would be important.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like John's saying that if that were to come into conversation, that would be a separate conversation unrelated to what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I mean, that is one thing I like about this edition is I believe it's new that the town manager has the authority to extend it beyond 30 years. It's not right. Was that there before, Jennifer? And am I just forgetting? I'm not looking at but the fact that, we have the 30 years and now we're saying the town manager can extend it. That's a new addition.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was there, but it just didn't have all of because previously
Clarity.
it said deed restrictions shall remain in effect for a minimum period of 20 years, but it didn't provide any guidance as to how additional time would be determined.
Yeah. I do like that. When I went to Affordable Housing Summit, I think in 23 or 24, and I talked to the group we were meeting with, some other small towns and someone from DOLA, and I mentioned that we had just passed this ordinance with a 20-year deed restriction. I saw some raised eyebrows, and I said, they're like, whoa, 20 years. And they said, yeah, down here to Boulder County Housing Association Authority, it's 30 minimum, and they mostly go longer or in perpetuity. And the woman had expressed to me that their concern was they had some properties coming up on that 30 years, and they were very concerned how that would go. I did do some research today with the county, and I guess this, kind of this help, it's good information that, and from Susanna Lopez Baker, she said, no properties have been or have plans to be converted to market rate, because that was the concern, was that 30 years they'd get bumped to market rate. And that was, this woman told me there was that fear a year or two ago. But as of today, the actual answer is, the reality so far is so no properties have been or have plans to be converted to market rate. We have run property with no restrictions, which means they could sell it or whatever, but we'll continue to keep them affordable. The earliest deed restrictions expire in 2038, and some properties are in perpetuity affordable. So the reality is, for Boulder County Housing Authority, this really hasn't manifested yet as a big deal. Maybe 13 years from now it will, but so that kind of helps reduce my stress about this thing. So y'all should know that I did do that homework and came back less
Thanks,
damning
Ben.
of these short years than I thought it would. You're welcome. More discussion? or a motion? The motions are,
I
are on,
got it.
thank
I
you.
move to approve ordinance 878, amending chapter 16 of the Nederland Municipal Code, clarifying the length of the deed restriction for affordable housing.
Second.
Thanks. And just one, question for Britt. So you're saying, Britt, what we're looking at just needs that edit anyways, and you told us that up front, that
Yeah.
in the header there, it
the
says
header.
870X, 87X.
Updating the packet so it's a correct on our website.
And other than that, it's,
It's the same exact language.
oh, okay. There was one thing. Why is there there's just one blank?
Is that the date of the Board of Trustee meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, that needs to be filled in.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. On
see
on
that.
page 65 of the packet, the first page of the ordinance. Yeah, it's just that. So you'll
Like I can update that with the date and put that on the packet as well as the print off. Does that work?
probably ultimately that'd be good, cleaner in the long run. And then, yeah, before I sign it, that'd be cool. All right. So we have a motion and a second. Macy?
Trustee Maris, Trustee Miller,
Yes.
Trustee Larson,
Yes.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
and Trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate that. With that, we'll move to our first discussion item. We've got a few of those tonight. The first one is on our donation policy.
Mayor and trustees, just like to acknowledge a little mistake in my packet. I got you the resolution and the aim, but you do not actually have the policy. So I'd like to just walk you really quickly through what I have, and then this could come to you for approval on the 2nd, if that's okay with you.
Do you have a visual or just going to read it to us?
I can pop it on the screen.
That would be great.
Actually, I don't have Teams up. Give me 1 second here.
There is something in the packet on page 74 that looks like a resolution.
The resolution is there. You just don't have the actual policy.
Yeah, there's the aim, there's the
Yeah.
resolution, but the policy is.
Sorry about that. I'm
Amended.
going to read it to you. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to kind of go over what it
Sure,
says.
that's fine.
And then I will put this in the packet so you can review it for actual approval, which was the plan anyway. So anyway, what we've got here is a policy. The purpose of the policy is just to provide a clear and consistent process for accepting donations of cash, materials, labor, professional services, or physical improvements for Nederland. I want to make sure that these donations really support town priorities and adopted plans, that they meet legal safety and quality standards, can be delivered and maintained over time with the available resources the town has, and that we manage these processes transparently and equitably. The scope of it is just kind of what I just said there: cash donations, either restricted for a purpose by the donor, or unrestricted that just can be used for anything. In-kind materials, equipment, or supplies, donated labor, professional services, which kind of would be any kind of physical improvements or installations on town property. That could be like an art project or something like that too. And then also volunteer projects when they're proposed by outside individuals or groups and not kind of managed by the town staff. There's donations in the policy, or definitions, I'm sorry, and I'll give this to you so you have it, but we talk about adopted town plans, which is like the comprehensive plan, the multimodal plan, the PROS plan, an as-built record, donations, in-kind donations, physical improvements, real property, restricted donations, staff coordinated volunteer work, standard installation, and volunteer labor. Generally, the principles that are written into the plan right now are that donations and projects should support adopted town plans, policies, and priorities. There should be town oversight of projects, meaning that staff should determine the intended use, location, and design standards for projects. All projects should meet applicable codes, standards, and accepted best practices for whatever it is that is happening. Projects must fit within available staff capacity and resources for delivery and ongoing maintenance, just meaning that we need to make sure that we can take care of what's happening and that there's time to do the project and all of that kind of thing. It says that we will apply this policy consistently to all proposals, making sure that no one gets preferential treatment. Projects cannot create unfunded or unsustainable long-term obligations, and just transparency that we need to document and report all of these transactions. In terms of evaluation, I put some criteria here for us to be thinking about. One is that all projects should meet applicable law, code, and safety standards. They should align with town plans, fit with available staff capacity, include funding or a plan for long-term maintenance, have a clear scope, timeline, and identified resources, treats applicants equitably and avoids perception of favoritism. And for physical improvements, location, intended use, and design standards should be determined in coordination with staff. For more complex projects, we also need to determine whether engineering or professional review is required. For that, the trigger, I think, should be that any project that has features, structures, or design elements beyond the standard installation should require professional review. And that should be a staff level decision or possibly a board decision, just making sure that we think about what things that we're doing do need that kind of review process. When that is required, the town will just need to determine the funding source for that. And I think that that is something that will be kind of project by project, just depending on what's happening. I put a note in here about public engagement, that we may require public engagement for donations or volunteer projects that have high visibility, significant community impact, or are likely to generate public interest or concern. And the scope of this is just project specific and dependent on what's happening, and may include things like notice to adjacent property owners, advisory board review, public meetings, or other feedback opportunities. For use and determination, I've just got basically what I said is town staff should determine the intended use, location, and design standards for any proposed facility or improvement based on our adopted plans, applicable standards, site conditions, and kind of system-wide considerations. And what I was thinking there is just kind of alignment with strategic goals and plan of the board and what's happening in town at that time. We'll also determine, as we kind of do that part of the project, whether we need that professional or engineering review. Volunteer projects, we did talk about that at the meeting and tried to make sure that it's not difficult for folks to do this work. And all I've got here is that all volunteer work should be coordinated with and authorized before work begins. Staff coordinated volunteer work is exempt from this policy, and higher risk or more complex projects like trail building, structural work, or excavation that are not staff coordinated just need to go through that evaluation process. For cash donations, I just make a distinction between unrestricted donations, which could be used at the town's discretion, and restricted, which means that like somebody wants to do a certain kind of project. And I think for those things, we just need to make sure that whatever is desired is feasible, legal, and consistent with our plans. We also may decline these kinds of donations if we cannot, if it is impractical, if it creates an unfunded obligation, or if it's in conflict with other town priorities. I have a documentation requirement here that we may require a donation acceptance form, which is something that we need to develop, a gift agreement, a professional services agreement, and potentially an as-built record, just making sure that whatever is built does confirm or does comply with whatever the approved design is. Approval process, what I said is that we should follow the thresholds established by the town's current finance and purchasing policy. That means, this policy can just stay in line with whatever that is and what we're doing at that time. We should estimate fair market value for donations, and that those within my approval authority can be accepted by me or my designee, consistent with the policy. Donations requiring Board of Trustees notification or approval under the purchase policy should come to you. And I think that's a fair kind of trigger point for that. The other thing is that we think you should consider all real property donations regardless of value, just so you can determine whether or not it's practical for us to accept that. We can make a recommendation on that too. And just saying that we'll use fair market value to determine values of donations. In terms of reporting, I think we can do a quarterly public report that will summarize accepted, declined, and deferred donations and projects with some notes. And that would just come at a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees, similar to our grant reporting or something like that. We can also present an annual summary to you, and that way we do have that transparency about projects and what's happening. And the final bit of this is just a right to decline. And it just says that we may decline any donation or volunteer project where the project does not meet the criteria in this policy, where it conflicts with adopted plans or priorities, where it creates financial, operational, or legal burdens, or where it cannot be delivered with available staff capacity for implementation or maintenance. I realize listening to this is not the easiest way to do this, but what I wanted to tell you is that we've been working to just keep a very simple process, and I think tying it to purchase policy is the most likely way to do that. If you have any other feedback or questions about the policy, I'm happy to take them. And then what I would do is present this to you in its full form with that resolution on the 2nd.
Clarifying questions for Jen? Okay, with that, we'll go. to
Oh, wait,
public comment.
sorry, my
Oh, go,
mic
sorry,
was-
sorry.
I do have a question if nobody else has one. And it's not gonna do. So, when it comes to like making these decisions, if things are appropriate or within the strategic plan or this or that, is that strictly within administrator decision, or where is the oversight on these? I mean, it's not like we're inundated with people wanting to do things voluntarily. Does this
Yeah.
just go administratively, or does it get flowed down to other opinions?
It would be administrative if it's within my purchasing policy, within the limits given to me within the purchasing policy, unless there's another trigger, like a real property thing that needs to come to the board. And what would happen is I'd look at the PROST and the comp plan, and then we have some trails plans, for instance, that do dictate what trail alignments are supposed to look like. So what I would do is go through those documents and determine kind of the scope of the project, which is very similar to how we would do any other project in the town. If you guys would like more oversight into that, that's possible to write in as well.
Could we use the rink link as a example tonight to just discuss like how that proposal would go down with the new policy, or is that not within the purview of this conversation? I need like a reference of where and
If
what.
somebody, we
You-
have identified.
Well, yeah, you maybe give an example. It may be the rink link, it may not.
Well, let's
Fine.
say that,
Give me
let's
an
just say like
example.
in general that there was a trail alignment that was desired to be constructed. We have some very old trail plans that show alignments for those trails and exactly what the width of that trail is supposed to be and what the construction is supposed to be. And that is an adopted town plan. And so what we would do is, using that kind of scope of work that we have documented that the town has created, we would say, similar to like any project where we're having a construction
Where
happen.
can you find these aligned trail diagrams at? I mean, and is it just through within town of Ned then? So it wouldn't go into forest areas?
We wouldn't control or be involved in a project that's not on town land.
I'm so, I
mean,
didn't know we had these, is that somewhere in like the town records that I can just, I mean, I'm just curious, 'cause I love trails.
Well, in the
these
broad
trail
sense, like we don't,
plans-
it depends on what was recommended. And so I think it really, that's the analysis that would be done. But we do, what I guess I'm telling you is we have a lot of those documents going back to 2012 for the current trails plan that we have, where we show alignments and like kind of the goals for each of these things. And so what we would do is we would either, using those documents, staff would create a scope of service for what that project would entail if it is a project that is desired by the town. And then if there was a volunteer who wanted to do that, then we'd work together to achieve that goal. There may be a situation where a volunteer wants to bring something different to the town. And that's where we really need to think about unintended.
That's gotta be a board decision. I can't think that should be administrative. That's just saying my opinion here with the ordinance you're creating. If something new's coming, I feel like it needs to get discussed.
Yeah, I mean, this, just to answer your question directly, Tanya, the trail alignments are in all of the PROST master plans going back as far as we have them. So, you know,
Right, but can't we
The-
ever think
the-
that
the
something
presence-
new
so,
could be
well,
created
well, I was
since
just saying
2012?
PROSAB indicated that they were wanting to finish that trail. And so it's not necessarily something that is new. It's just been part of the PROST plan.
That was the policy question I was asking you at the last meeting too, for the new thing, because I think what is important is that there's not unintended consequences from like a really well-intentioned project that creates a maintenance obligation, or maybe like something that we need to think about in terms of our liability for it over the long term. And that's where, like, I think that's why I brought this policy question to you in the first place, is because even if we wanted to build a certain trail alignment and there were certain things requested along that alignment that are different than kind of a standard installation, there should be a trigger there for both professional review, meaning engineering review and maybe floodplain or whatever it is. And maybe the board needs to be involved in that too. But that's really the question.
Well, I'd like to say for anything that deviates from your 2012 plan, that it shouldn't just be handled administratively. I feel like it should go up for discussion. Because
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair point, right? Like if it deviates from the plan, then yes, it's something that should be brought up for discussion. If it's not something that deviates from the plan, the town would be doing anyway.
absolutely, it should just get it done. Yes. But like, yeah, but there are very amazing things that could happen that are deviating from a plan. And then obviously it's a lot of responsibility for one person to accept or deny it. And so it should go to the board for discussion. As, bureaucratic as that sounds, but
Yeah.
I'd hate for something to just get shut down from. Well, that's just my thoughts on this particular discussion.
Thanks, Tanya. Other clarifying questions from the board before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll go to public comment. We can start in the room. Nancy, you want to make sure the mic's on there? You got 3 minutes, and go ahead and identify yourself.
Elizabeth Gerton, 65 Arickery Circle, Nederland. I've sent a letter to the board. I hope you have read it. I also forwarded to Mayor Giblin and John Kane the link to the Western Colorado University research study that found that human activity on trails negatively affects the elk population, causing them to avoid the area, depriving them of food sources and safe resting areas that they have used for generations. The study indicates that the loss of the elk population then disrupts the entire ecosystem, causing changes in vegetation and the loss of smaller animals and of insects that rely on that vegetation. We currently have a trail from the elementary school to the rink. That trail includes, by design, a small section less than half a block that runs along the dead-end gravel road that ends at the elementary school. That section of the road has only 2 homes and no traffic. The only difference the additional section of the trail will make is that cyclists will be able to ride through the green space that currently serves as wildlife habitat and as a corridor for wildlife traveling through to Mud Lake and Moose Meadows. I am asking the board to reconsider allowing the building of this unnecessary trail. The WCU study shows that increasing areas of human activity creates invisible boundaries, causing wildlife to avoid those areas. I ask each of you to consider what will matter most to people living in Nederland 10, 15, 20 years from now. Will they most regret that there is a half block of a bike trail that runs along a dead-end gravel road? Or will they regret that we no longer have elk population and no longer have many other species native to this area? In 10 or 15 years, will the school children visiting Wild Bear Nature Center who see pictures of elk and are told, years ago we had elk herds in Nederland, but they don't live here anymore? Will those children most regret that they can no longer see elk in the wild in Nederland? Or will they most regret that there is a bike trail that includes a half block that runs along a dead-end gravel road? Do we want Nederland to become a place crisscrossed by the invisible boundaries referred to in the WCU study, where we no longer have the diversity of wildlife we have now? There is a tipping point, a point where human activity overwhelms the habitat needed to sustain wildlife. We are near or at that tipping point in Nederland, and like climate change, once we go beyond that tipping point, the cascading effects can be rapid and devastating. I am asking the board to create some balance between the use of open spaces for human recreation and the preservation of open spaces for wildlife habitat. The WCU study shows us that unless an open space is very large, it cannot serve as both a human recreation area and wildlife habitat. The green space between the elementary school and the rink is an invaluable island that serves wildlife as a grazing and resting area because it has no trails or human activity. Okay. We already have a good trail from the school to the rink. I am asking the board to provide some constraint on the over-allocation of town open spaces to human recreation.
Thanks.
Please reconsider your decision to allow the unnecessary trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. More public comments? No one else in the room? Anyone online have a public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we'll ahead, thanks Elizabeth for that comment and for those links. Well, that will bring it back to the board. We have questions before the board on page. I'm almost there. Request for direction. Okay, so just a request for direction. Staff is requesting direction from the board regarding whether this policy meets the needs of Nederland, if there are additional changes needed. I think the next step, we probably would have need to have seen that policy.
Yeah, we actually have to bring this back one more time.
Yeah, I agree.
I can bring it back for you on discussion, just so you can have that conversation and you can.
Not
always
a
take action.
consent, please, yeah.
I wouldn't put, this wouldn't be a consent issue, but I was thinking if you want, we could put it on discussion. And if you want to move it to action, you could, or you could just do it at the meeting after that too.
Okay, that sounds good, because I mean, Ty and Nicole aren't here, so
Yeah.
then they may have,
I apologize about that. That won't happen
Oh.
again.
no worries, happens.
I want to clarify on something, one of the comments brought up, like, she was comparing Wild Bear, which I love, their development space and what the Link Rink was going to create. What is the level of impact between the two locations? I'd love to hear when you come back to the board, like, and just so you know, I love Wild Bear, like that, I feel like that should be, but what's the impact of that region? How many, is that 1 acre, half an acre, 2 acres compared to the actual land that will be
Well,
actually?
I think it's more about the corridor,
And
to
I
just,
think
go
we're
ahead.
confusing, this is about the donation policy versus a single project.
Right,
These
right,
are two
right.
totally
Well, I
different
know, I'm
topics.
just.
We're talking about
I
the
had-
donation let
well,
me finish.
Comment
Well-
left a question in my head, that's all.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
Yeah, but we're talking about the donation policy, and I think in the terms of
We
the
don't have
donation
a policy
policy.
in front of us right now. So
Right,
we have
right,
to
right.
Do,
read it
But-
later. Okay, I'm having a discussion.
Okay.
on a
'Cause-
totally different topic.
Not really, because the person who just had a comment was describing the difference between
No, that
how
wasn't.
this trail is
I
going
th-
to
I think-
impact the Wild Bear
No,
kids. And I
You
just was
interpreted
like,
it wrong as usual.
I,
Tanya. We're
no,
doing
no,
something
I
totally different.
think
We're
what
doing-
I heard is that she said someday, kids at Wild Bear will see pictures of elk because they'll no longer be able to go through there. I think
Okay, that's
that was
interesting because
that
the
was a
Wild Bear
comment.
development impacted a couple acres of what was wildland too. So, and I'm just so confused right now. Sorry, Chris. I guess I'm just an idiot as usual.
If you show
God,
up
you're
at meetings
such a-
and paid attention.
Okay,
to
please,
it,
let's
you've
not,
read
let's
Can-
not.
can we just
do it.
bring
I
this-
am paying attention.
Can we bring this
Yeah,
back
you,
to?
you are
the-
paying attention. I think let's be civil with each other. I think, the reality is, what I heard was
How
just,
about we just talk about this next meeting when we actually have something to talk about? There we go.
Well, I think we should bring this back to the donation policy, which is what the
thank you.
agenda item is here. Obviously, there's some feeling about other things, but we can either bring that up in other business or as a separate item if it needs to be. But as it pertains to the donation policy, I feel like we have done our best to capture how to make this both easy for people who want to donate to the town to do so, and also, create a solid foundation for the town to be transparent in what it's accepting and how those donations are applied. And that seems to me to be the kind of important part of this issue. So, the way I feel about that right now, like I would say the sooner we can get this to an action item, the better.
Yeah, and I think there's room on probably September 2nd, eh?
Yes, sir. really quickly, one of the direction points I heard is new project trigger board review. Is that,
I would say something that is not currently in one of our master plans, something that's, outside the scope of something that we're looking at would trigger some review. To be,
Well, it makes sense because the master plan has had public,
yeah.
the
to-
public has seen it and they ultimately got the plan approved.
Right.
And then basically any new trails or modifications or
Yeah.
constructions
Any-
need to be in the public eye.
Yeah, any new development installation, whatever it happens to be. I mean, we've brought up the art installation thing a couple of times. And I don't know if it necessarily applies, but like the discussion chairs that, we're putting up, I mean, those are donated, and that didn't kick off any conversation about a donation policy, but that's a permanent installation on town property that, in my opinion, falls within the scope of this and actually was a totally new project that wasn't on a master plan. And so probably should have come up and just said, hey, is this something that we want to do? As we're talking about the rink trail, that's something that's been on the master plans for a very long time. And so it doesn't necessarily fit into something that is a new development outside of the scope of things the town has been working on.
Thanks, Luke. So I think we'll just plan to bring it back, and I think, yeah, that one, to do some work into that into the policy about what triggers bringing it to the board or, ProSab and the board.
okay.
Great.
The other one I just wanted to mention is the scorecard, the sustainability scorecard. Depending on, you guys have you trigger that review process right now for SAB, but that is something I just want to kind of put in your thought process too, that as we do these would be a town project, which could be triggered under that. And it may not be everyone, that's your discretion, but I just want to put that in your head that might be an advisory step that you take as we kind of work through these projects.
You're referring to like ProSab should have something like that.
It's actually kind of contemplated in that planning process, but I think you guys have expressed some questions about that process in general and how you might modernize it for the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is we may want to tag that point that this is something, when you think about the sustainability of a project, that might be something that you do, and it might go to PROS review or not PROS, I'm sorry, to ProSab and to SAB review or something like that. But I wanted to try to build that possibility into this policy so you have that option.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I think we discussed that last time that the particular sub boards that might have more context for a decision would be able to advise on a particular project if it had donation aspects to it, and not so much that that's a BOT thing or a staff thing. Like, let's let the SAB or ProSab or other planning commission or whoever make that advisory based on their much more detailed context.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Luke. Yeah, what you need.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Okay. I may at some point have to step out because these coughing fits start, and then I might just have to be outside, so you have to listen to him. Can you go on to the next one?
I cast the sustainability coordinator, and I can talk about the next item. So the CU Boulder Masters of the Environment, or MENV capstone program, was brought to my attention through a number of different avenues, through emails, through the Sustainability Advisory Board members, and including one member who is currently involved with a capstone program, Erica Thorley with the town of Erie. So this program specifically matches graduate students with different partner organizations that include nonprofits, businesses, towns, municipalities, counties. And the graduate students essentially serve as external consultants who address these real world sustainability and environmental challenges, and help to produce deliverables for whatever the partner kind of decides they need from a project like this. The projects last about 12 months and they involve a lot of community and stakeholder engagement, a lot of collaboration between the partner and the students, and final implementation deliverables that are due essentially by the end of the year. And so we're referring to the 2026 capstone program. So that would essentially start in January and end in December of 2026. The Board of Trustees has been talking a lot about strategic planning, and there is, a lot of emphasis on resiliency and sustainability in the comp plan. The, 2025 comp plans framework is built on resilience and how that shows up in urban planning. And the MENV program specifically looks at resiliency and sustainability, including they have a whole topic area that students can specialize in that is specifically urban resiliency and sustainability. So students are specifically coming into that program looking for hands-on ways to learn about that area and implement what they've learned. And I also included in that AIM a link to their website. So this is not a new idea to Nederland. The Sustainability Action Plan for Nederland was first created in 2014. And there are a lot of initiatives that were mentioned in that plan that have already been completed, including, having an eco-pass program for residents, performing a water and sewer rate study, creating a food pantry, waste diversion tracking, and the list goes on. So there's a lot of things in that plan that have already been accomplished, and that is, something to celebrate, I think. However, there are a lot of things in there that are outdated just because a lot has changed in the last 11 years. And specifically, resiliency is something that I think the town knows is important and would be important to implement and integrate into a lot of these really good ideas that were presented first in the sustainability plan in 2014. The MENV program is not new to Nederland either. The 100% renewable energy resolution basically asked SAB to create a plan to achieve that goal, and then SAB went to MENV, applied for their program, and worked with them to create a plan. And that was, I believe, 2018 that plan was delivered. And recently, just another thing that you all are very aware of is the MOU that we signed with Partners in Energy to create a new energy action plan that will hopefully be completed in early 2026. And the idea of the sustainability and resiliency plan is different from the energy action plan in that sustainability and resiliency encompass a lot more than just energy, especially like building and electrification. It also encompasses, transportation, transit, water conservation and quality, food systems, circular economy and zero waste, protecting our natural environment, including wildlife and also our urban forestry, public health and social resilience, economic resilience, cultural resilience. A lot goes into it more than just energy. And I know that you all are very aware of that and also find that as a very important thing to integrate into everything that the town does. So I am bringing this forward essentially to ask if the Board of Trustees would like myself to draft a proposal for this MENV program in order to have the students create a sustainability and resiliency plan, or it's not limited to that. If there are other topics, projects that you have in mind, we can explore those options as well for a project with the capstone program. But on this aim, I included a timeline. So essentially, the proposals are due on September 26th. So I'm bringing this to you now, and we'll, hopefully bring a final proposal to you to vote on before the 26th. And then there'll be a whole process where the students would discuss those projects. We'd be able to meet with students about the projects, and then they would determine which ones that they want to work on. And so I will say there is a chance that the project does not get chosen. There is no financial commitment that is required. I was told that the financial commitment is just something that's kind of like a bonus if we're able to provide that. And if we do find money for that somewhere in the future, after submitting the proposal, we can always offer that later. But it is not a make or break for whether our project would be chosen by students. And also just wanted to mention that I think a big reason why I've brought
And then
two
had a big fight about it.
a big reason why I've brought two different aims to you recently about doing plans is mostly because as sustainability coordinator, I find that I don't have very clear direction from pre-existing plans that are up to date and actually like kind of tell me what to do. And so creating these plans will hopefully help me and anyone in my position in the future have some actionable strategies to look at and get to work on. And so really what I'm asking, is, is this something you want to pursue? And then also what priorities and outcomes does the board envision for a sustainability and resiliency plan or other project?
Thanks, Cass. Sorry, I missed some of that. Appreciate it. I did read it though. Do you have clarifying questions for Cass?
Do you know how many proposals they receive for these projects?
I'm not sure how many they receive, but I know that the current capstone project or program has 7 projects in place. My guess is that they might receive like twice as many applications.
So odds are pretty good of getting
Yeah,
selected. Okay.
I think so. Especially I think with a project for a town, because I don't think that many municipalities are applying, and students seem to be very interested in that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like a really good opportunity, actually.
Sorry about that. More questions?
Sorry, not to hog all the questioning.
No, that's all. That's pretty.
So one of your questions was like, what priorities and outcomes does the board envision for sustainability and resiliency? It's kind of a big question. Do you have some sort of like a condensed, suggestions for
Sure.
us?
Can I also add on to that question? I see that proposals are due September 26th, so we've got, not too much time. When's the next SAB meeting, and could you and SAB give us suggestions about answers to that question?
The next SAB meeting is the 28th of August, so next week. And we could definitely, that's an item on the agenda is to talk about this, so we can definitely get that list of priorities and outcomes that like they kind of envision for a plan like this to you. I think, a lot of the same categories from like the last sustainability plan would be relevant. So, looking at water systems, circular economy, just climate in general, the built environment, health and wellness, all of those things would be like definitely priorities and kind of like focus areas. So we can bring a list like that to you with kind of like things specific, maybe like draft goals that they're looking for.
So if you have to have proposals in by the 26th, there isn't really too much time for you to come back to us with more suggestions. It's sort of like probably you want to be coming back to us with a draft proposal at the next BOT meeting.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 more BOT meetings before, so I could come back with what SAB recommends on the 2nd, and then bring a full proposal on the 16th.
Yeah.
That's, definitely possible. It'll be kind of tight turnaround for getting it in for the packet, but I
Yeah.
think it's doable.
Even if it was just a rough draft, like so,
Yeah.
we could give any feedback and then finalize on the 16th.
Yeah, and unfortunately SAB was unable to meet last month, otherwise it probably would have all that.
Right.
But yeah.
Cool. Well, I say yes. I think that's it's a great opportunity.
I agree with Luke.
Great. Yeah, we do. Public comments. Open for public comments? Okay. Thank you. Folks online, do you have any public comments on this MENV's capstone? Great. With that, we can bring it back to the board. I will say, we've had, what the community CWPP, get that screwed up, but the community wildfire plan, mitigation plan, protection plan. There's 3 folks from this program that helped write that, and a lot of them ended up in jobs. Couple with, I think, wildfire partners and others in local communities. I think Boulder Watershed Collective, I think too. And my brother's actually in this program in a different major, but it's these capstone projects end up being very useful for the folks they do them for. So my brother's doing his next year. So, do you have what you need? Actually, no, we're bringing it back. So do you have what you need? A lot of discussion happened during clarifying questions. What else would you like?
Just at the next, probably deciding whether I should go forward with a full proposal or not. Yeah. I think it's good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
This is more of a clarifying question, even though it's discussion time, but so if we did get selected, most of that work would happen next summer.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. So we'd be sort of looking at, seeing some results sometime at the end of 2026.
Yes. And I think that timeline works out well because if we're doing the energy action plan and that is going to be finished in like April or May, ideally, of 2026, then they still have time to like incorporate a lot of that into the final sustainability plan.
Cool.
And also if you guys are going to be doing more strategic planning, they'll be either involved or able to listen in on that as well.
Cool.
Thanks, Cass. With that, we'll move on to our next discussion item, peak-to-peak multi-jurisdictional housing authority feasibility update. And I think we have someone here.
I'm just going to give you guys a quick background for most of you who don't know, but Sarah Walsh will do a much better job than I will. She's from the core planning group. So she's going to provide a presentation update on the feasibility of this project. Just as a reminder, Gilpin County, along with Central City, Town of Nederland, and Town of Lyons, are currently engaged with core planning group to develop a multi-jurisdictional housing authority feasibility study. So the purpose of this is to collaboratively effectively address pressing housing market challenges in our communities by exploring this multi-jurisdictional housing authority to support the sustainable development and preservation of affordable and obtainable housing. So I won't go into it too much. I will bring up the presentation on the board. You guys also have access to it in the packet, and I will let her take it from.
It's not? Okay. Thanks, Britt. Yeah, if you could put the presentation up, that would be excellent. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. As Britt mentioned, my name's Sarah Walsh. I run a very small consulting company that focuses on public sector real estate and housing. I worked in the Front Range for a decade plus, and now pretty much exclusively work in more rural, mountain-oriented communities. I live in Chaffee County, and I've been kind of helping to crack the nut of affordable housing in mountain and resort communities for a few years. I can tell you it is a nut that no one has cracked yet. So these are really hard conversations. But I give a lot of credit to Britt and Lyons and the folks at Gilpin County for wanting to explore some really unique and creative solutions. You're good. I'm lost without my PowerPoint. Well, we can start. Okay, so we go to the next. Yeah, I don't know why there's that gray box.
I don't know how to get rid of
It's okay. Just
There we
keep
go.
scrolling. Okay, keep going. Keep
you want it now?
going.
I'm just trying to. Oh. There we go.
I can also like plug my laptop in somewhere if that's easier. Okay, there we go. Go back.
Let's do that.
Okay, we can start here. One thing, oh, there we go. Okay, so just so you all know who has participated in this feasibility study. So we have Gilpin County, which is really the lead on the grant. So this was a local planning grant, a state-funded local planning grant that funded our contract. And then we had the town of Lyons participating. Britt has been in our working group. We have Central City, and then the Silver Dollar Metro District was the representative from Blackhawk. So just so you know kind of who's been at the table, we've been meeting since May. And we've been doing a lot of work to kind of figure out what this could actually look like in practice. Britt just described the purpose, so I won't harp on that. But really, the goal is to figure out, is this a feasible operating structure? Does it add anything to the different municipalities that they don't already have from existing agencies? What would it actually look like in practice? What would it cost? How would we operate it? So we're trying to answer all those questions. So I have some kind of preliminary information from you all today, and the goal is really to just get like a temperature gauge and a gut check of where you guys feel like you might want to go with this. Just so you know kind of where we're headed. So as I mentioned, we've been meeting since the end of May. We had our first kind of stakeholder engagement presentation on July 15th, the Gilpin County Commissioners. I presented to the Lions Board of Trustees 2 weeks ago. Now we're coming to you all. We are presenting to Central City, TBD on the date, but soon. And our goal is really by the fall to come back to you guys with some concrete recommendations. One thing too, I want to point out is based on kind of where you all sit on this, if this is something you feel like you want to explore further, we have talked about a desire to do public workshops on this. That is something that is part of our contract. Obviously, if the outcome is like, yeah, Ned's good with BCHA, we don't want to participate, then it doesn't make sense to do a public workshop. So we wanted to kind of get a temperature gauge first and then figure out what that broader stakeholder engagements should look like. At the end of all this, we will have, a really comprehensive feasibility study that outlines the operational structure, the finances, who we talked to, what the feedback was, how you would actually go about forming this thing. And my contract is through next May. So if it is like all signs a go, all the municipalities are like, yeah, let's do this thing by the end of the year. We would also support with some of the document drafting. My background is as a real estate attorney. So we do some of that work in-house, and then we can contract with outside real estate counsel to do it as well. So let me do a quick primer on what a multi-jurisdictional housing authority is. We don't have a good acronym, unfortunately. I need to come up with one, but I'll just kind of talk to you about how they're formed, how they're funded, like what this actually means. Go to the next slide. So this comes from Colorado state statutes. There's a relatively new statute that authorizes the formation of this entity, and it's actually pretty vague and allows a lot of leeway for this entity. The powers include planning, financing, building, and maintaining housing projects and programs. The exact language is they have to be targeted at low or moderate income families and or employees of local employers. So it's really vague. There's a lot of leeway, but it does have to be focused on housing. To form it, it's actually mechanically pretty simple. You need an intergovernmental agreement between the municipalities that are going to participate. So it's basically just negotiating a contract. Obviously, sounds simple in practice, can take years. Sounds simple in theory, can take years in practice. But basically, you just need an IGA that forms the entity. You have to establish a board of directors, and then you have to designate a financial officer and somebody to be the liaison to the Department of Revenue. Those are pretty much the only requirements per statute for the entity. Typically, these organizations are funded through some combination of general fund contributions and, these bodies do have the authority to levy taxes. What I've seen most commonly is the entity will be funded through general fund, and then maybe after it's established for like a year or two, then the entity will go out for a ballot measure. That's kind of the typical thing that I've seen. And then of course, these entities can source grants. So they're eligible for pretty much every grant that's out there that any other municipality would be eligible for. The board of directors ultimately has oversight over the organization. I have seen situations where an existing employee will sort of just get this added to their plate. Like, congratulations, you run the multi-jurisdictional housing authority now. I don't think that's best practice for obvious reasons. I think what's more common and more successful is hiring at least 1 to 3 full-time employees for this organization. I'll go through some examples of what other jurisdictions have done. But typically you want at least a couple dedicated employees. So one example in Chaffee County, which is where I live, and I know this entity very well, we formed a multi-jurisdictional housing authority in 2021. There's an IGA between BV, Salida, and the county. There's 3 full-time employees, including an ED. It's mostly funded through the county. So $150,000 a year comes from the county, $15,000 a year each from the cities of BV and Salida. They actually put 2 ballot measures on the ballot last year. Only 1 was approved, but they expect that to add about $350,000 in annual revenue. They do a lot of grant-funded development projects. So this entity really takes on a lot of the grant writing on behalf of the different municipalities, really focused on workforce and affordable housing units. They also do property management. So, I heard you guys talking about deed restrictions earlier, and I think John brought up there's sort of an administrative component to deed restrictions, and that is true, and it's something that is often forgotten when people I think all this grant money gets really exciting and people we can do these cool projects, and people kind of forget that there's an operational component, and you have to verify income, and you have to do that continuously, and you have to have a unified application process, and there's kind of all these things that have to happen to be able to run it effectively. So this entity serves as that body, that sort of administrative body, to uniformly administer things like deed restrictions. They also do wraparound services. So things like homebuyer education, bilingual, navigation of mortgage applications, stuff like that. Yeah, you can go to the next one. So Clear Creek is interesting because they, as far as I know, just about to hire or going to hire their first executive director for their regional housing authority. They entered into their IGA it was either December of last year or January of 2025. So really, really new. They've only budgeted for 1 employee. And again, last I heard, I'm trying to figure out who this person is so I can connect with them, but they were about to hire somebody. You can see the budget breakdown there. There's a typo that's not supposed to say Clear Creek Plume, that's supposed to say Clear Creek County. But mostly, similarly, the county funds most of the bill. The allocation is based on population percentages.
I didn't know Georgetown was that big compared to Idaho Springs. I mean, if I'm basing the population on
Yeah. You can go to the next one. Just one more example in Southeast Colorado. This is a really super rural area, heavily agricultural. They have an economic development organization that actually the multi-jurisdictional housing authority is part of their economic development organization. And so they really do a lot. They do a lot more than just housing. They do transportation, they do their enterprise loan funds and all that. But it is really robust and it serves as a really strong economic development engine for the region.
How do they, where does their money come from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. I couldn't find some of these IGAs are like pretty easy to find, and within them there's always the contribution table. I have not been able to find their IGA yet, but I'm still working on it. So I'll find out for you.
Thanks.
So we kind of got our heads together and we said, all right, so we understand kind of basically how this thing works. Like what would it cost and what would it look like to actually do it across this peak to peak region? Yeah, it's a little interesting because it spans 2 counties. I have talked to my kind of closest attorney contact who deals exclusively in these things. And he said, legally, there's no restriction on forming an entity across counties, as long as the IGA just, all municipalities are part of the IGA. But it is interesting. And I think one of the things you guys are going to have to think through is really like, what does it mean? What would it mean to be part of 2 different housing agencies? What do they do differently? Do they overlap in any way? Do they add value? Like making sure they each add value. So that's just kind of one interesting quirk of this effort.
Does it have to be, I mean, are we in a place where we could still use both? Or I thought it
Oh, yeah,
would come in
100%.
either or. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's going to be the question really is like, we'll talk through the things that I think this entity could accomplish. I do think it's probably not the service you're getting from Boulder County Housing Authority right now. And obviously like Britt can speak more to that. But if you're participating in this agency, right, like you want to be able to show value. You want your taxpayers to know like we're getting value from being in 2 different housing authorities. I think the biggest thing that I heard from this working group is really just like, these are small jurisdictions, like everybody's doing everything. Capacity is really, really strained. And housing and real estate projects are hard. They're complicated. They take a lot of time. Grant funding, like I always say, there's no such thing as free money there. It's a lot of work to write a grant application, to manage the compliance, to manage the reporting. Like even just agreeing to be a Prop 123 district, like is a lot of work, and that doesn't even involve any projects. So I think really the appeal from a staff lens is like you're basically just adding capacity to all the planning departments. You're adding people who can help with grants, who can stay in touch with state legislators to understand what's going on. Like you're really just kind of adding capacity. And for each jurisdiction to do that on their own would cost it's so cost prohibitive that there's just kind of this economies of scale. And I think that some of the biggest pain points are really around like the administration, the uniform administration of projects, the grant sourcing and grant compliance, and then really just feeling like, I heard the same thing from Lions too. I think they're in a similar situation to you guys, like you're part of BCHA, but it's a different, community, different needs. And so there's sometimes just a mismatch there. Next slide. And just so you guys know that we did not sort of throw out all of the work that has been done on housing. We took every single housing needs assessment and comp plan and all of that over the last like 5 to 10 years. And we thoroughly analyzed all of them, and we used those to come up with our initial list of priorities. Go to the next slide. Here's kind of the summary of where we found common priorities across all the jurisdictions. One is like, a lot of these areas are places where there's just a lot of single family homes, and there's just not a lot of density and not a lot of diversity in housing stock, which makes affordability really challenging. There's kind of a desire to update a lot of codes and regulations. Part of this is due to Prop 123. There's a desire to incentivize things like ADU or other naturally occurring affordable housing. There's also a need to help with Prop 123 commitments, huge desire for workforce housing. And then the last one, which is somewhat unique, I think not every community is facing this, is really an aging population in a lot of places. It's certainly not the case in the Front Range and not necessarily the case in Chaffee County either. So I do think this is a unique problem that all these jurisdictions are facing. So our laundry list of ideas, if we were like, we could have a magic wand and have somebody do all of these things, you can see that here, but I've kind of already touched on all of it. It's really around managing, sourcing grants, and being able to administer both sort of standard things like deed restrictions and stuff like that, and also more unique things like exploring aging in place programs. There's some really cool models out there that involve both ADU incentives and having a caretaker live in the ADU. Like there's just some unique things out there. Roaring Fork is doing a really cool down payment assistance, a buy down program they're calling, where basically they're giving people up to 30% of a home at the price of a home in exchange for a deed restriction on that home. So all those kind of cool outside of the box things, like that's likely not what you're going to get from Boulder County Housing Authority. I won't go into this detail. We kind of phase this out, like what would this look like over 3 years, kind of just so you could see, like, if we did this, what would a 3-year plan look like for this entity? This is just draft, but one option would be year one. You're really focusing on getting the administrative side all rocking and rolling, like making sure all deed restrictions are administration is uniform, applications are uniform, they're simple, they're clear, the public knows how to access them, and then figuring out what are those kind of interesting creative programs that you want to tackle, whether it's a buy down program, ADU incentive, aging in place. How do we fund those? Let's do some stakeholder engagement around that too, and then kind of launching those programs in years 2 and 3. Okay, so let's get down to the numbers. So we built out a draft budget, really simple, basic, but I based this on some of the budgets and other IGAs from other entities who have done this. This is based on hiring 2 full-time employees, so an executive director and a grant manager, and then a little bit of contract help as needed. The legal and accounting costs are really high in year 1, and then they go down significantly because you're forming the entity and all that good stuff. And then the budget is kind of just under $400,000 to have 2 full-time employees per year. Go to the next one. So what this would mean for each jurisdiction, we decided to take the population percentage approach, which is the same thing that Clear Creek did. And you can see the percentages here, just a little quirk that the denominator is different for Central City because they are actually part of Gilpin County. But essentially Gilpin County would be footing about $200,000 a year. For Ned, it would be just under 70,000, about 66,000 a year if we go by population percentage. And again, this is just draft, like this is all just to give you guys something to react to. And if you go to the next slide, we said, well, what if we needed to cut this down a little bit? Could we get the budget under 300,000? We made some tweaks. We assumed that like website, tech support, the county will pay for all that. And then you just have 1 contracted employee. So you're not paying fringe, but you're paying a little more annually. And that gets us down to under 300,000. I think the trade-off obviously is going to be the amount of support you get, especially on the grant side. If you had a dedicated grant manager that could support you, I think that probably would be a huge benefit. But this still, adds another person. And this contribution table, if you go to the next slide, would look like this. So you'd have about 150,000 from Gilpin County and just under 50,000 from you all. And if you go to the next slide, I'm almost done and I'll, okay. So we're at the, so before I open it up, I'll just say at the Gilpin County Commissioners meeting, they were really favorable on this. Like they were, I think, totally ready to go and talking about how they're going to fund it and possibly using a portion of a new lodging tax. So the feedback was really positive. The Lions meeting, I think, was shorter. We were time constrained, so we didn't have as much time as I would have liked. But I think the biggest question, they're generally favorable, but the biggest question was, what does this mean to be part of 2 housing authorities? And like, how do we talk about that and explain it? So just to know the feedback that I've gotten from the other stakeholder groups. But that's it. So that's my presentation. Now I just want to hear from you guys.
Is Blackhawk?
Yeah, so I've learned a lot about the politics there in trying to do this project. They are not interested in participating. I think there's some political stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm not fully privy to, but they do not want to participate. They want to do stuff on their own. Yeah.
With their whopping population of like 100 people.
Right. Well, of course, right. The folks from Central City and Gilpin County, they're like, well, like all of your workforce lives in our jurisdiction, so we're going to be housing them. I think
Right,
that was
right.
the reaction. Yeah, but I'm
Good
saying I'm like
reaction.
I'm here to I've told them I'm like I just want to help you guys swear your goals, like whatever it is. But yeah, haven't been able to break that yet.
Any what more clarifying questions, Sarah?
You had on there that the authority has the power to issue bonds. And
Correct.
so what are those bonds backed by if they were to issue?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for you at this
They,
moment.
they can be, there's different kinds of bonds. It could be a revenue bond depending on the structure of it.
That's what
It
I was
can
thinking.
also be a go bond or a cop bond if it needs to be, but it just depends on the structure of the deal and how private investment is involved in it.
Gotcha.
Can I comment really quickly? So I'm aware that Summit County has a multi-jurisdictional housing authority, and I think theirs is pretty successful. They have levied a tax, and Keystone, the town of Keystone, is expected to get about $1 million from that tax this year.
Eagle County is also exploring forming one as well.
Yeah, so different sales tax structure there. There's a lot of commercial, but it's
And do these agencies are they getting revenue from, like, as you mentioned, like property management or something? Like, are they, like, if they're have a multi, like an apartment complex or something, like, are they collecting the rent from that as revenue or like?
They could. I think it depends on who is like the ultimate kind of owner of the affordable housing project, like how those entities play together. Like, would it make sense for them to charge the city when the city is funding the budget? Like, I think it would just depend on who the ultimate. But I mean, the reality is in a lot of places, like maybe it's the same here, municipalities just use private property managers. And my experience with that is that it's often not great. The quality varies widely. They keep almost no data. I did a research project last year on affordable housing in rural resort communities, and I was shocked at how little data I could get from property managers. Like, they don't keep race, ethnicity, like family size, what's your job, what's your industry. And I think the challenge with that is like, it's almost impossible to then look back in 10 years and say, were we successful? Like, if you have no data on who's living in your units, you can't evaluate the impact of your investment. And so the value of having this centralized body too, to me, is being able to effectively evaluate impact of all of these like little piecemeal projects going on all over the place.
The Clear Creek one that was my project right before I got here.
Oh, good.
And it does contemplate a property management style agreement that could happen with both the mobile home facilities that are there and also with some of the tax exempt or the tax credit housing that does exist there. But I don't think that structure exists yet because they're on this kind of shoestring budget, just trying to have somebody working in that space and kind of full-time quarterback. But that was one of the ways they thought that they could generate
Mhm.
enough revenue for the organization without knowing that they can pass a tax.
Mm-hmm.
And yep. So speaking of a tax, like that seems like a real challenge in this cross county multi, like everything from,
Yeah.
Central City to Lyons, like, would you have to form a special district in order to do that?
to do the property.
Well, just any kind of tax that were to
No,
support that.
you do it through your multi-jurisdictional housing authority. That's what it's done through.
It's like
They're
a,
the ones
yeah.
that levy the tax.
And
The
so,
state collects it and it goes to the housing authority.
but like, how do you define like who pays a tax?
It's the municipalities and counties.
So it'd be, if it would be everybody in Boulder County.
No, it'd be
Yeah.
Gilpin County and Nederland,
Yeah.
Mhm.
town of.
So whoever is
What,
participating
or
in your-
Lyons.
Sorry,
so-
and
so-
let.
So like
Yes,
the
great.
town of Lyons, the town of Nederland.
Yeah.
And all of Gilpin County. But
Yeah. I mean, it would be somewhat complicated, to your point.
yeah, it just seems
Yeah.
like, and because a lot of our, Nederland area isn't the town of Nederland, a lot of it is Boulder County. Yeah, I mean, I'm not like trying to make
No,
it
it's a
sound
good
hard,
question.
but yeah, it just seems like taxing, just the people in Netherlands for something that's going to benefit, like, all of Ridge Road and Cold Springs and Sugarloaf and
Yeah.
all of that. Like,
But we won't be building any units out there, right? Like
No,
we
totally,
wouldn't
but-
build any units outside the district either, so.
but isn't that the kind of thing like that maybe like, take like aging in place, like you've got somebody who lives on Sugarloaf
Right.
who's, not able to stay in their single family home and they're like, oh, look, Netherlands just built a, retirement community in town and I just moved there. And I didn't pay any tax into it.
I don't hate that.
No, yeah, I
Even
mean,
so,
yeah,
you
no, I'm
know,
just,
you know.
I just,
They have to move here though, and then
Right.
presumably
They-
then they
they
get
would,
taxed.
right, they would, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Another thing that Summit County does, and that's a developer impact fee. So
Mhm.
whenever there's new development, an impact fee gets assessed, and that money then goes to the housing authority, so that new development kind of pays the way
Mhm.
for the impacts on the lack of affordable housing.
MGHA is also in statute can advocate and they can do things like property inspections. There's several statutory duties that they do have that can be maybe useful to us
Mhm.
and like expanding our capacity to help manage some of those resources too.
And what are just some, I'm sorry if you said this already, but what are some examples of taxes that have been levied? So like my understanding, I think that like the Eco Pass district, we have a levy on the property tax. So it's like an additional property tax in the Eco Pass district. Is that generally what we'd be seeing here, or is it a different type of tax levy?
They can do sales and property tax. Summit County is sales tax.
And they can take debt. That's the other really
Mhm.
big thing. And then they can also use private activity bonds, which are another kind of bond that could help in affordable housing land.
And whatever, if a tax was decided, it would have to be in the IGA and we would all have to agree, everybody in the jurisdiction. Yeah.
Would there be an advantage in like creating a district for it? I mean, like the EcoPass district or the library district, like, would it make sense to do that? Like as something that would just make the whole thing easier and like you're gonna it would be tax everybody in the district, even if it's kind of weird shaped. I have no idea what's involved in creating a new, district in that way.
You should move to Texas and get into the government there and you're gonna learn all about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. We will open up for public comment for what's worth. I don't know if there's anyone on here outside. There's one person. Well, there's two people. So we're going to open up. There's no one in the room from the public. Anyone online have any comments, public comment on this? Okay, we'll bring it back. And any other feedback or anything? Questions, folks? Chris, you have anything before you go on this subject? Okay.
I love this idea, but I know that we are strapped for cash recently and going into budget season is always a scary thing. But if we could figure out a way to make it work financially, I think it seems like kind of a no-brainer way to try to move forward with our goals and make some more affordable housing up here. And thank you so much for all your work on this. It's incredible.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Britt? Yeah, what you
I
need?
was just gonna ask, are there any more like gut reactions or like looking, at that price tag? I know that is a big thing for us. But I think right now you have to think about it. And most of these, not in Gilpin County, although they're losing everyone. But in a lot of ours, like Lions and myself, it's like we are departments of one. And so essentially this would be what would fall on us. So just to keep that kind of perspective as we're moving forward with it. They're having a lot of turnover right now. Their positions are getting filled, but they had a couple people leave in their planning department. So Jamie is over there now. She took over Rob's position, and then their planner one just got swapped out as well.
What about
A couple new faces.
What about Lions? Says-
Lions is Lisa Ritchie. She came from Superior. And then you guys know me.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, just something to digest as we're thinking about that, but great perspective to have and good feedback for our group, I think.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Appreciate it, Sarah.
Yeah.
Thanks a bunch. Thanks for coming over. Drive safe if you're going back. All right. With that, we'll go on. Oops. To our next discussion item on the procurement policy.
Well, Mayor and Trustees, before you is a draft of a policy to modify our procurement policy itself. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First, we had an audit from DHSEM, which is the Department of Homeland Security, this spring, and they asked us to make some changes to our policy just to align with federal policy. The second reason is to align with the digital accessibility law, which requires us to have certain considerations for technology and digital services purchases. In my staff report, I kind of give you a summary of the updates. The other really big one is the town manager purchase authority. It does contemplate an increase in that authority to 50,000 just to make sure that we're kind of aligned to what things cost right now. Not to try to create administrative delays while we're kind of doing that work, but also to make sure that you guys are still approving expenditures and appropriations and all that kind of thing. It's got a little bit more about process, making sure that we are thinking about what happens in kind of the digital world. It clarifies some of our rules and just our emergency purchasing kind of thoughts, and then expands on conflict of interest provisions. This one, what we would do is bring this back on the 2nd if you are supportive of this policy, and we can also make changes to it if you've got direction about that.
Oh, awesome. Thanks, John. Clarifying questions?
Just to clarify, John, the purchasing policy, you just made edits to it. It's not a whole new one. It's just not redlined. Is that right?
Yeah, in the packet, there is the current one that we use. It's the, I don't know what page it starts on in the packet, but it's the current purchase policy addendum A. And the new policy is it's a new draft of it, different format, but largely it's just updating the policy with these new requirements.
Got it. Thank you.
It would be helpful to see those kind of married, to see because I think at 114 it's not a replacement, right?
It's brand new, but.
Okay. Never
the
mind.
Concepts are very similar, but it is a new policy.
The original is on 137, I think. Is that right, John? Am I reading that
Oh,
correctly?
I was looking at them in the wrong order. Okay.
Yeah, the second one is the original one.
Second one's okay, sorry. Okay, great. So really it's just a repeal and replace. Okay, yeah. All right, cool, that's fine. Then there's no need to do that. In this case. What other questions do we have? This is kind of a big deal ultimately.
I will say that this is a pretty consistent purchasing policy with municipalities. You have your different guardrails of monetary figures, smaller purchases. You don't have to do as much research in terms of finding contractors. Larger purchases, you have to send out an RFP. And then you have exceptions, which are really very consistent in local government practice. So it is a typical policy. And those exceptions are consistent with what you have in your current policy.
One quick question, clarifying thing, because you mentioned this was kind of triggered by a DHS audit. And I noticed one of the things brought in was, our summary of updates was a federal compliance section. Is the only federal compliance section that section 4, or are there other pieces kind of sprinkled throughout?
I think that's the specific language we needed. I think
Yeah.
the rest of it, there's nothing not compliant, but
Mhm.
I think what you're saying is true. Like it's
Okay.
that's where we're trying to have that specific language.
Okay, thanks.
Just, I'm guessing it's a typo, but on, what is this? Section 6A, that table has town manager approval amount of 10,000 and not the 50,000 in the initial section.
That one's a little bit different. So that's like the classification of procurement. And what it's talking about is in those. Wait, that's right, Jennifer?
Yeah, so yeah.
That's the process I would use in that under $10,000 range. And then, so basically like currently the way we do that is a purchase order and then we go out for bids. And that was something we talked about in one of our last projects is to try to be a little bit more robust in where we're getting bids from. And so that simple procurement policy is the policy we would use for something like that. And then a formal procurement policy would be something like a bid, like not a bid, an RFP or something like that. And the process we'd use there. So you can see in the, in section B there, the simple procurement policy is laid out and then the quotation or solicitation procedure, and then the letter of proposal procedure. And then there's also the way, it gives me the right to call for formal bids, which is we use Rocky Mountain BidNet for that process right now. And this just puts some clarification around how we do that. And that's mostly useful for the department head so that when we go through those processes, they know which one we're using or whatever.
I'm still not clear on the 10,000 versus 50. That like,
It's a typo.
okay, that's what I was like. And then there's another one here on the definitions section where it says, definitions, town manager approval amount is $10,000 in parentheses, $50,000.
Oh,
Um,
good catch.
Okay. So that wherever it's referencing $10,000, it should say 50 is the general gist.
Thank you.
Okay.
There is another section, I think, on page 116 too, unless small dollar purchases is different. But it says if it's less than 10,000, you can go directly to you, but it should be 50. Everything should be 50. Is that right?
Yeah, the 10, so town managers shall retain written records of the price quotes for any purchase made between $10,000 and $50,000. Okay, that seems more reasonable. Oh,
More edits or catches. So next step is, if we support the proposed updates as they are, you'll prepare a final draft, and we gave you some edits here for formal adoption at a subsequent meeting. Any other updates or edits or recommendations? Actually, I gotta go to public comment. There's no one in the room. Folks online, any comments on our procurement policy? And then we'll bring it back. If there's no other feedback, John, do you need anything else?
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, one other thing to note is that if the board approves this $50,000 purchase amount, we would also need to amend the municipal code to revise it because I think it has a $10,000 limit for the town manager authority.
Thanks for that. Yeah. And now would they come together basically? Those amendments?
We
That
could do an
amendment?
ordinance to bring it together, bring it
Great.
at the same time.
Awesome. Yeah, what you need, John?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, we'll go to our last discussion item of the evening.
Well, Mayor and trustees, when we met with the Sustainability Advisory Board previously in work session, we talked about ways to strengthen the role of your advisory boards and to make sure they are operating under clear and consistent standards. And one way we can do that is by formalizing them through ordinance and kind of talking about how they operate. And so before you is a draft ordinance that does that. And generally, it would apply to all boards, commissions, and committees of the Board of Trustees. And it kind of talks about the formation of boards, their scope, membership requirements, how they're appointed and removed. It does impose term limits on boards, and it ensures that all meetings or all boards work through Colorado open meeting law. It has a process for the adoption of bylaws and annual work plans to make sure that they're aligned to town goals. It assigns a staff liaison to each board that is responsible for preparing agendas and materials, for maintaining records and performing administrative functions. And then it codifies our existing boards without really changing anything in how they operate. So for us right now, that's the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Advisory Board. That is the Sustainability Advisory Board and Planning Commission. As you know, we do have BZA, but they have different statutory authority and not appropriate to kind of govern through this structure. Planning Commission does have some of that kind of land use authority under the state code, or the state statute, but it's also the pieces that are for the town. That's kind of what we're talking about here. The things that really will help having an ordinance like this and why this matters in that section, I think the first one is strategically aligning all of the advisory boards to the Board of Trustees so that work flows up and down and communication is consistent and folks are working on the same kinds of goals across the organization. It kind of gives a better connection to the community in that it really helps make sure that the board, the advisory boards, and residents' priorities and policies all kind of move together. It supports accountability and transparency by making sure that we're complying with all the kind of open records, open meetings and public record law. It helps make sure that we have timely informed decisions so that you can push things to your advisory boards when they come up and they can be working on things and get those recommendations back to you quickly. It supports the role of staff in this process to make sure that we're providing good administrative support. That could be aims, making sure that agendas are ADA accessible as required by law, that kind of thing. And then it allows our boards to really bring their subject specific knowledge to the benefit of the town in the most effective way. It allows you to be working on policy and budget direction. Staff can contribute in kind of operational and technical places, and then the boards themselves can be experts in the spaces that they're experts in. That's also just the other last thing is just makes it consistent. So everybody's kind of following the same rules and guidelines. So in my staff report, just 3 requests for direction. The first is, would you like to proceed with establishing an ordinance like this? The second is, are these general standards and board structures appropriate? And then is there anything else that you'd like to add or subtract from what is before you? If this is good, we can bring this back for you for formal consideration in September.
Can I ask a question? These, like the purpose, I'm just like comparing the purpose of SAB versus the purpose of pro SAB. And it seems like, I mean, did that language already exist? It seems like pro SAB, it's more like it starts with we may ask pro SAB to research and evaluate, where it seems like SAB, the purpose is more they will tell us, advise us about things. Is there a way to be consistent in the language that we use?
I think that's a great question. I think that's a really foundational question for this ordinance too. I would say yes, I think that's important. But when you look at like kind of their formation and how that happened, I think that's just kind of reflective of that. I think that the best kind of practice for this is that they're advising you on these technical matters. And so ProSab, for instance, has their PROST plan that they do, which is Parks, Recreation, Open Space, thinking about how we use those spaces. SAB is thinking about these sustainability efforts. And I think one of the challenges that we've seen with the advisory board specifically, not so much Planning Commission and BZA, is that their work plans aren't always connected to the work plans of the Board of Trustees. So it can make it difficult to like stay aligned to the priorities of this board. So I think like clarifying that language is probably a really good idea to make sure they stay aligned. That is the other reason why we put that annual work planning kind of effort in there and trying to connect that to the Board of Trustees, so that you'll know in 2026, they're generally going to be working on these things, although things may come up, but that's kind of like the thought is that we can plan out their work similar to how we plan for the Board of Trustees.
Great. And kind of speaking of connection too, I think I would love to get their feedback as well, pro SAB and SAB and Planning Commission, just to, they might have suggestions that we hadn't thought about, or they might have ideas, some of which we may take, some of which we might not, but I think it would be good to kind of put this before them before making any decisions on anything.
Yeah, I think particularly around the sort of purpose sections and kind of overviews of responsibilities. I think that's kind of a good spot to get the feedback from, all of the specific boards. I haven't gotten all the way through this, but is there a need to distinguish between the advisory boards and the Planning Commission, and that just like what role is expected of an advisory board, and how do those, do we want to sort of codify how that advice is transmitted to the board, to the BOT? Which kind of touches on what you were saying on, like whether the BOT asks for their advice or the advisory board compiles their advice and presents it to the BOT. It seems like it'd be helpful to have an established pattern for that, for the advisory boards in particular.
I think that's what we're thinking with the work plan, because I think ultimately it needs to be advised by the BOT. They need to have the flexibility to work and to bring those plans forward. And I think there could be a process where you might have a work session with them and that is presented for the next year.
Mhm.
But I think by and large, that's what the best practice would be, is your advisory boards, within reason, have latitude to kind of be bringing those things to you, but then also that you guys are kind of the peak of the mountain and you're saying, these are the processes we're going to use and these are our goals and priorities based on your strategic vision and values.
Also, just to clarify, on the Planning Commission, they do have an advisory role. They do perform quasi judicial hearings, which is not advisory, but these ordinances that come before you, that is part of their advisory role. And that
Even that deed restriction was kind of.
And then this is more of clarifying, but just I'm not quite clear on the term, both the term limits and the term lengths. There seems to be either I'm misreading some of the sections, or there's some conflicting information about whether terms are limited to 2 terms. Or there's something about term of 1 year or less.
Which one is that for? Because it doesn't seem like that's
Well,
all of them.
these are just like general, these were just general things. So like it says like no persons shall serve more than 2 consecutive terms. Provided blah, 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 blah.
But then different boards have different terms.
Tell Roger that.
Right, yeah. And then each appointment shall be for a term of 3 years unless appointment is to fill a vacancy.
But the planning commission is 4 years. Right, planning commission is 4 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think some of them we don't necessarily.
But here it
want-
says-
want
Just
term
This is just the general
limits.
boards and
General.
commissions section.
Right. Is this intended to make a change so that there is a term limit for advisory boards?
That's how it's drafted.
That's how it's drafted. That was
Yes.
intentionally drafted that way.
That is, yes, it's
Okay.
drafted that way. And there is a provision in there that you can override the 2-year or 2 terms through a resolution.
And then it says an appointment will be for 3 years. So that changes Planning Commission to 3 years from 4 years. That's on page 146 under appointments.
Yeah.
Number 3.
Yeah, 3 years, or Initial term for members of newly created boards shall be staggered and shall be for either 1, 2, or 3 years. I guess maybe there's some clarity there, but one of my larger questions is, is that, is a limit something that's beneficial? I mean, I know we often struggle to fill our advisory boards and, if we're gonna be limiting people who are willing to continue to commit their time to it,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem, I have a feeling we're just gonna be overriding that.
Yeah, it was problematic. Yeah. I mean, like, I made a joke about Roger, but like, do we really want to just say, sorry, Roger, you're done, when it doesn't really serve the town to end it, to limit?
You said it can be overridden by resolution. Is that in a case-by-case resolution, or is it like we have a resolution that doesn't apply to the planning
It's
commission?
a case-by-case resolution. Essentially, I think that gives you an easy way to say, oh, sorry,
No other
you're
people.
term limited. And
So you're saying case by case is in individual people or individual boards?
no,
people.
individual people, every appointment.
At this point, I don't see a particular advantage of having a term limit. Considering how, sparsely staffed our boards are.
And considering that when we do get applications, we still appoint, right? So we might take into account that someone's been on the board, on that advisory board for 2 terms and there's a new voice, and that might be something we consider, right?
In process, what happens is if you have one seat, it just goes on consent.
Mhm.
And so that's where the question would be. And I think what the resolution does is it causes a conversation to happen because that would have to come to you for
But if
deliberation.
there's only 1 seat and 1 person, there's,
I still think you might want to have a conversation. There might be something that you want to preserve for future boards, but I understand the point too about.
but we could do that
Yeah.
anyway, couldn't we? Without a term limit? We could just
Yes.
not put that on consent agenda.
Right. I mean, because the board approves all appointments, even if there's one person.
That would
for
only
one
be if there's
seat.
an open seat. So you wouldn't ever
We would-
have seats necessarily coming up. I guess you would.
But their
yeah.
appointment, even if it's, if their current term is up and there's nobody who's reapplying for their seat, they still need to be reappointed.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
we still vote on
Still
that.
That's
makes
a fair point.
sense.
It just makes it, sometimes these things are difficult, and having these conversations with your neighbors and friends are tough. And so it gives you an opportunity to say, we'd like to, we're interested in hearing from new people, but you don't have to have that in there.
I don't know if I feel strongly either way, honestly.
I was gonna say,
I'm debating with myself about it, but
this might be a place, let's send it to the boards for their input.
yeah.
The boards themselves might come back with strong arguments one way or another.
Yeah. And that,
You can also reduce your numbers on your board. I mean, you can reduce your boards. You have 7 members on the ProSab, and I think 7 on SAB. You
Okay.
could,
We really have 7?
yeah, you have 7. So you could reduce that to 5.
I don't think I've ever seen 7 people in a meeting.
yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to jump on that option either. I mean, it's a good one, but at the same time, we've had a hard time getting people to join, but at the same time, like if 7 people are willing to do it, I hate to say sorry, just because 7 heads are better than 5.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, my limited experience has been that never does everybody make it. You're always short a person or 2. So,
Your quorum would come down if you're with a lower number, but at the same time, like it gets kind of hard.
right.
for
And yeah, do you really
the 3
want
people to do
2 or 3 people, making decisions if you only have, 4 or 5?
Yeah, it is a good option though, so it's good to know. It may make sense in some situations.
Overall, I think this is a great plan. I mean, like, getting consistency, and especially in the way that information, trickles up and is transmitted down, I think that is going to help us a lot in terms of the boards actually having, a stronger impact and also just spending their time doing stuff that has, is more aligned with what the board is seeking. So overall, I think this is a great idea.
We could do it without term limits too. And then if it becomes something that you guys want to do in the future, it's just an amendment process really. So
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
I think it's also, like Chris said, it's a good idea to just check in with the boards and see what they feel, because some people might say, yeah, new voices are good. I only want to have 2 terms, and I think that there should only be 2 terms.
Yeah.
So I think it would be good
Yeah.
to just get people's opinions. I agree. I like this plan. I think getting consistency is great, and getting everyone on the same page. I'd just like to see this go to the boards, get feedback from them, and I think I'd like to see it be a little bit more consistent within itself. Even the purpose for, SAB versus pro SAB, as it's written, you've got purpose, and then you've got purpose and advisory role, then you've got review and collaboration for SAB, but you don't have that for pro SAB. I think if we could just have it be more consistent internally, that might help with the consistent externally as well. If we can make it. There might be things that we can't be consistent.
And would this potentially kick off like some changes in the bylaws for those specific boards too? Like, do we need to address that and just say like this policies in this ordinance?
yeah, there's a bylaw process in there and that,
would override the bylaws of the board.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, are these the only 3 advisory boards? Am I reading this right? That
There
is
is-
SAB and Planning Commission?
DDA is different because they're the other authority. We also have some other boards and commissions of the boards and commissions themselves, and that's a little bit of a gray area here too.
Okay.
Like we have a zero waste committee and some other things like that happen ad hoc, but this also would allow you to create task force and things like that. An example would be like the Grand Island Resources work that we did, that SAB did.
Mm-hmm.
And so they formed a task force to do that, but we might have
Great.
like a parking task force or whatever.
Totally. So these are the 3 main advisory boards. We just have subcommittees.
Yeah.
Right. Great.
Is there an opportunity here to formalize the youth advisory board?
Yes, there is. And that is a really good idea that we can put some thought into that and think
Yeah.
about that.
I'd love to see that become
That's a really good idea.
formal thing.
Also, if there's other boards, this gives you a process to create them. So that's the other thing that it would give us the ability to, as you move forward, to be kind of agile in that space.
So I think we can go to public comment unless I'm mistaken. No one's in the room. Folks online, you have any public comment there is one member of the public. Any public comment on this item? Or is it commission consistencies? Now we can bring it back. John, do you have everything you want and need?
Yep,
At
we
this
will.
point?
The direction is bring it to the boards and we can do that. And then we'll bring it to you once we're ready for a final consideration of it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so I'll go back up here. I think we have gotten through our little list. So we'll give time now for public comment on non-agenda items. If anyone's online that wants to give a comment on non-agenda item, now's your time. Seeing none or hearing none, we'll go to other business. I do have one thing that Ty asked me to bring up. I think he mentioned it to both of us. So SAB has the Partners in Energy committee needs a liaison basically, or from Ned, and SAB members have suggested that one of them be that liaison, and so that's something I guess we got to work through more, but is that something you all would want to see brought back to us at a later meeting?
It's like just approving whether SAB would send somebody, or are they
Yeah.
selecting somebody specifically?
Yes, well, approving approving that they would, and then and really approving the process, but I think they would come back to us with specifics. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. They just need to identify the person and they could just inform you at the next meeting or get approval from you.
Okay, great. So if people are open to that, we'll be talking about that soon in upcoming meeting. Great. Any other business? Go for it.
This is just an update. There's no action required at this time, but I wanted to tell you that we were informed by DREAMS, which is the mining safety board for Colorado, that Grand Island Resources has sent in their response to what's called the adequacy review. This is something that we've been working on in town a little bit and then kind of monitoring the process that they're kind of looking at their permitting. We have access to the response and there's like a 60-day window to provide comment. And so we're going to be working on that. I just wanted to tell you that that process is moving forward through the mining permitting process.
And did they, because I know we submitted, kind of like a formal, letter of questions and stuff. Did they address any of our questions in their response?
It's a 600-page response. We just got it today. So I need to
Okay.
go through it. But I think that this response, DREAM sends them a bunch of questions that they have about the permit, and then they have the time to respond. And then there would be a hearing at some point to address all the concerns in the application, which are what's saying concerns, just comments that were made essentially. And we do have standing in that process. And that I don't know when that hearing would be yet. That has to be set. But we do have this ability to provide comments on this response as well. So
Okay.
our comments are tracked and recorded in the file, and we do have standing in the case.
Okay. Because I remember, when they had held that open house Q&A, I asked them specifically about, our submission, and they said they would absolutely respond to all of our questions. So curious how that will play out.
And for all those members of the public listening to this meeting, is that response available publicly through the DREAMS website or?
It is. It's a little bit complicated to navigate, but if we can publish again the permit number, which makes it easier to find. And then there's, to be honest, thousands of files in there, but you can search for the response itself once you're in there.
Great, thanks, John. Any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I hear a motion, a second.
Mayor Billy,
Yes.
Trustee Miller,
Yes, please.
Trustee Maris,
Yes.
and Trustee Larson. Yes. Thank you. I'd like to note for the record that Trustee Corvalon left the meeting this evening at 8:20 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned at 9:33 p.m.
Thanks, Macy. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good work tonight.